Я хотел бы предоставить слово Педро Альба, директору и постоянному представителю Всемирного банка в России, который расскажет о конкуренции регионов в глобальном мире. Спасибо.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you very much, Minister, for inviting me here. It really is an honor for me to be. I think I'm one of the few foreigners here, and I apologize. I don't speak Russian yet. Look, we are going to go through some of the international experience, and if this works, of course. Hold on. There we are. Yes. So we're going to go through some of the international experience in competition. I'm going to make only 3 points because I only have 15 minutes. The competition is important. Many of you already discussed that, so I'm going to try to go through that very quickly. I then point out the fact that countries have successfully improved their competition policies. We're going to go through 1 or 2 examples, in particular the European Union, Australia. And I think also we will focus at the end on Russia. And it's clear from the numbers we have that you have not focused too much on competition policy. And there is a lot of benefits that you can by doing so. So the presentation follows those key points, and I'll move ahead. I think the first thing I wanted to say is, point I wanted to make, it's that firms that compete. It's not countries. We always talk about countries competing in the international arena. In reality, it's firms. And I think it's an important distinction because we'll go through that over time. Firms are responsible for the production, the sale of goods and services. They're responsible for combining the labor, the capital, the land, all the inputs. They're responsible also for choosing the technology and managing the production and marketing process to maximize profits, as our friend from the retail group said. And if they do so given the policy framework and the institutional framework, and they take into account other factors such as geography, etc. Infrastructure is important also because it helps firms become more competitive and actually try to reduce the factors such as geography, distance, and also it simplifies input markets. And I think it's important, it's the firm, it's the productive firm, which is the heart of any sustained improvement in economic growth and diversification. You've talked a lot here about the benefits for consumers, about a competition. I'd like to turn it around a little bit and say that competition is important for growth and diversification, which are the key objectives of the authorities, as expressed so many times. Less productive firms are not able to survive in export markets. There's a lot of evidence on that. They do not innovate very well. They're not able to innovate. And they don't produce new goods and services that survive the market test. Productive firms are also essential for the welfare of citizens, not only on the side of the consumer, but also on the side of the wages. You cannot pay high wages over time if you're not productive. Right? Any wage and rate needs to be sustained by productivity. So in the long term, everybody benefits from productivity and I think competition. And obviously, from my point of view, I think we've all said it, we all agree, so it's kind of banal, as somebody said. Competition is one of the key factors affecting the incentive regime, right? And there is much evidence that these incentives are critical for cost reduction and quality improvement. And I wanted to say that this is a slide which I like a lot. You've been discussing it a lot here. You know, the role of the state is an important issue here in Russia. And I don't think cutting off the head of the state is what you want to do here. What you want to have is, in fact, you want to maybe cut off any other part but the head, because what you want is smart government, right? Government that does appropriate regulation and follows appropriate policies. So it's not just getting rid of the state. Maybe what we want to do is improve how it works. Now, I must admit that the World Bank has many times, perhaps has been the person there with a sword and with a hat. We've also advocated many times reducing the role of the state. And I think sometimes we have made a mistake. So I think now we've come to the realization that what we need is a smarter state. And in competition policy, the key factors that you know, how can the government affect competition? It's through competition law, entry and exit regulations, red tape. I think the ministers kind of mentioned all these. It also affects through FDI restrictions, foreign direct investment and trade policy. International trade and foreign investment are essential for competition. And of course, the regulation of infrastructure and service sectors. Look, I think I'm not going to go very much into this, but there's no doubt that competition has a very significant impact on growth and on economic welfare. These are just some slides. I could bring you many, many, many slides. There's actually multiple work that prove this, that competition does affect positively economic growth. These are some that come from from the World Economic Forum and some indicators we've used in the World Bank. And they just show that there's a very strong correlation between higher GDP per capita and competition in local markets, and it's also high correlation with growth. And finally, also the similar correlation between higher frequencies of entry and exit of firms into industries and growth in per capita income. So there's a lot of empirical evidence that competition does indeed help growth. Look, I think this slide, what I wanted to do is two things. I wanted to show that the great majority of the countries, of the developed countries in the world, have spent since 1998 to 2008, significantly and systematically trying to improve their competition policies. This product market regulation is a measure of competition policies. I'll go a little bit more into that later. Just now to summarize, it tries to measure the quality of competition policies in the country. And you can see that systematically every single country on that list have tried to improve their competition policies. You can see also on the right-hand side an example of specific industries. And again, you can see this systematic attempt over time to improve these policies. And we'll go a little bit into that why. This is the ministers and many others' point here. Competition does affect retail prices. This is obviously the case. I'm not going to go into this. I think the point I wanted to make here is that competition is important also for export diversification. Because if you're a firm in Romania whose profit margin is 17%, right, and you're facing much tougher competition in Germany or in the UK, where your profit margin is maybe 6%, right, where firms have 6% profit margins, it's unlikely that you're going to spend a lot of time trying to export. So if you have high profit margins in your own country, there's less incentives to try to find foreign markets. And these numbers come from our competition, the EBRD, who also produces a lot of numbers on this. So we too have competition. In this case is EBRD. I think the other point we want to make in this slide is there's a view out there that suggests that in the East Asian countries, domestic competition was not encouraged. And there is some truth to that. But there's also other countries where this is not the case. And we wanted to bring in this case the example which Michael Porter brings about, which is about Japan. In Japan, if people have done a lot of empirical studies, and they relate the sectors and companies that most benefited from international trade, the most successful companies, were also those who faced more competition in their domestic markets. So there is a very strong correlation between competition domestically and the ability of firms to be able to compete on international markets. It's kind of, China may be contrary to that, and we'll go into that a bit later in my presentation. Now we're going into the examples, and I think this example of the European Union is an important one because it addresses some of the issues which you've been discussing here today. First thing is, the first point I wanted to make with this slide is with the entry into force of the Treaty of Rome, right, and the creation of a much more integrated market, which includes, and I'll go into that now, competition policy, the European Union was able to basically catch up, right, almost its lag with respect to productivity in the United States. So between 39 and 59, on average, EU labor productivity was around 53% of that of the United States. By 1993, it was 102%. And we believe that competition policy and the creation of a unified market, which implies competition, had much to do with this incredible improvement in European productivity. I think if you look at the Treaty of Rome, this is my second point, the European Common Market is based on free competition. And this is not only, if you look at competition policy generally, one part of competition policy is the one we traditionally look at textbooks, which is you want to impede anti-competitive business practices by private sector firms, right? You know, the cartels, abuse of market position, etc. But there's a second part of competition policy, which is, I think has been mentioned a lot here, is the issue of making sure that state aid and government regulation is fair to all businesses. And finally, there's the interaction between the two. So this second aspect of competition policy, which is called competition advocacy, which really implies looking at every single government regulation or the most important regulations and trying to make sure that those regulations restrict competition the least possible, or not at all, if that's possible. And I think there